Greetings. I am Uranus, Dr. Uranus. And as you can see, I'm once again wearing the lab coat. I have been in the lab, inventing the means to defeat my arch nemesis, that mask wrestling superhero, Mr. Incognito. But now you want to hear about movies. But this time, I want to talk about something a little different. 3 TV series from 3 different decades that had abbreviated runs in their initial TV airings, but which have achieved cult status. The Invaders, Kolchak the Night Stalker, and Friday the 13th, the series. The premise of each of these series was excellent. So why did each eventually fail? The Invaders premiered in January of 1967 on ABC. Architect David Vincent, played by Roy Thinnes, was returning from a business trip looking for a shortcut that he never found. He fell asleep in his car and awoke to see the landing of an alien spacecraft. Each week, David Vincent would embark on a different quest to defeat the alien invasion and get proof of the invaders' existence. The reason the invaders failed was summed up best by the show's creator, Larry Cohen, on an episode commentary. It got repetitive. The reason it got repetitive was that early on, the producers painted themselves into a corner by stating that the show was about paranoia. And because it was about paranoia, David Vincent became obsessed. And because he became obsessed, he kept making the same mistakes over and over again, episode after episode, until viewers' expectations were frustrated and alienated. There were a number of good episodes. Beachhead, Panic, Moonshot from the first season, The Spores, which guest starred Gene Hackman, Dark Outpost, guest starring Dawn Wells, Mary Ann of Gilligan's Island, and The Life Seekers, all from the second season. Perhaps if the producers had written in a sidekick for Roy Thinnes, it might have helped the show by lightening it up. But this nor anything else ever happened, and The Invaders was cancelled at the end of the 1967-68 season.
In the weeks to come, David Vincent's compelling search will lead him to the Invaders.
Give him human form again.
Intelligent beings from a dying planet. Their objective, conquest of our Earth.
All right, you've seen the ship. Now let's get out of here.
Again.
No!
Somehow, he must convince a disbelieving world that the nightmare has already begun.
You are a very foolish man, Mr. Vincent.
Be sure to see The Invaders every week in color on ABC.
Kolchak the Night Stalker aired during the 1974-75 TV season. Based on the character created by Jeff Rice and featured in the TV movies The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler, Kolchak the Night Stalker followed the weekly adventures of Carl Kolchak, played by Darren McGavin, a reporter for a Chicago news service who tracked down the various paranormal dangers in the second city. Joining the cast from the movies was Simon Oakland as Kolchak's harried editor Tony Vincenzo. From the very beginning, Kolchak the Night Stalker had problems. The production values were cheap, even shoddy, and looked it. The monsters weren't that scary and sometimes looked like a man in a rubber suit. The last episode, The Sentry, is an example of this. There are a few good episodes, such as The Spanish Moss Murders, The Energy Eater, and Demon in Lace. These were, however, the exceptions. There were also a few aspects of the show that stretched credulity. One was that even though the show was based or set in Chicago, the seasons never seemed to change. Would it not have been better been set in Southern California, the American Southwest, or the Gulf Coast, or Florida, where seasonal changes are minor? If so, then Kolchak's ice cream seersucker suit, as he always wore, would have been appropriate. Another troubling aspect was that Carl never seemed to file a news story. In fact, he seemed to have contempt for his co-workers who were actually trying to do their assigned work. What employer would tolerate that kind of behavior? All these negatives, plus a hero who wasn't the nicest of human beings, contributed to the demise of Kolchak the Night Stalker after 20 episodes.
My name is Kolchak of the Daily Chronicle. Kolchak. Kolchak reports the bizarre, the supernatural, the unexplainable.
You again is another crazy story.
This nut thinks he is a vampire. You know what I call that? Irresponsible yellow journalism. He has killed 4, maybe 5 women. I saw that so-called super killer wipe up the streets with your so-called police force.
They don't want any help from amateur bloodhounds like you.
I've been a reporter for 22 years. I've been a police officer for 30. Well, then why don't you retire?
Each man in the field is issued one of these, and one of these.
Are you suggesting that we pound one of these into Skorzeny's chest?
No, into his heart.
Darren McGavin, the Night Stalker.
Friday the 13th, the series, was an American-Canadian co-production that was produced in Canada and aired in the U.S. in 3-season syndication from 1987 to 1990. The premise of the show, originally titled The 13th Hour, was that antiques dealer Louis Ventredi had made a pact with the devil to sell cursed objects. He backed out of the deal and was taken to hell. He left his store to his niece, Mickey, played by Roby. One name, Roby. One name, just one name, that was it. One name, Roby. And his nephew, Ryan, played by John D. LeMay. They soon learned of the curse, retrieve a cursed object and render it harmless. This show should have had a longer run. The premise was compelling. The writing and production values were brilliant. The direction was excellent. The stars were attractive. The production garnered several awards and was Emmy nominated in technical categories. So what went wrong? There are, to my knowledge, no interviews with former cast members or production staff. Interview extras do not exist on the DVD releases. As I'm speaking to you now, I have no solid information as to why Friday the 13th, the series, had an abbreviated run. Except a theory. The producers of the show made one critical mistake when they planned the show. They made the young leads, Ryan and Mickey, cousins. Consequently, no sexual tension could exist between them. Such tension might have been a nice contrast to and relief from the horror and chills of each episode. Unfortunately, John D. LeMay was the odd man out in this problem. The writers had a difficult time writing for him. Everything they tried was snakebit. After a while, the Ryan character became cranky and needy, even whiny and churlish. So much so that at the beginning of the 3rd season, John D. LeMay was written out of the show and replaced by actor Stephen Monner as Johnny. With the arrival of Johnny, the show seemed to be trying to get some sexual tension going between Mickey and Johnny. But by then, it was too little too late, and the show ended its run in 1990 after 71 episodes. And that is my theory.
On Friday the 13th, the patients in this psycho ward will confront their deepest fears.
Help me!
So prepare to cross the threshold of holy terror. Your guide is Dr. Carter. Her method carries a curse. If it doesn't cure you, it will kill you. On an all-new episode of Friday the 13th, the series. Next week, make an appointment with terror.
Okay, gang, you remember me a while back I was talking about an episode of The Adventures of Superman, Semi-Private Eye, with Jack Larson doing his Jimmy Olsen thing, and in the course of that particular episode, he and Elijah Cook Jr. used judo to subdue these 2 thugs. Well, it's a funny thing, but in the comic books, Jimmy Olsen has more or less been depicted as a judo practitioner, In a lot of stories from the Silver Age, you will see Jimmy Olsen doing judo. One of those stories comes from
Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen.
That's right. We had a comic book called Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. We also had a comic book called Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane. And I always felt that Perry White was shortchanged. Shouldn't there have been a comic book lawyer, Perry White? But that's a whole nother thing. In this story from Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, number 91, it's basically, I'd like to say they're paying homage to High School Confidential. Instead, I'm going to say, yeah, they basically ripped off the plot of High School Confidential. Jimmy Olsen goes undercover to infiltrate the Dragons gang, motorcycle gang, and he goes back to high school even though he's a college grad, and he's trying to get the goods on these guys. But during the course of the story, to infiltrate the gang, he takes on one of the dragons in a fight. He makes a pass at the guy's girl. The guy doesn't appreciate it too much, so Jimmy is going to fight the guy. And just before they square off, Jimmy's going, well, I'm glad I've been brushing up on my judo technique. But I'll try not to hurt this guy. The guy starts tossing Jimmy like he was a salad. And there's a reason for this that's explained later in the story. It seems like Batman's sidekick, Robin the Boy Wonder, was also infiltrating the gang. And that's who Jimmy decided to pick the fight with, Robin in disguise. And Robin really gives him a judo lesson. Later in the story, when they're going to capture the bad guys, Jimmy and Robin, of course, team up, and Robin gives Jimmy another judo lesson. Fortunately for Jimmy, he was using his judo technique against the bad guys. But this is a really fun story, one of those stories that makes the Silver Age of comics so great. And we have another issue of Superman's pal,
Jimmy Olsen.
I mean, come on, kid. How do you not love that title? How do you not love the Silver Age? This particular comic comes from that era during the 60s when Batmania was running wild. The popularity of the Batman television show caused the editors at DC Comics to put Batman in some way on almost every comic book they published. And on this particular cover, we have Jimmy delivering a kick to Superman, and he's about to toss Batman. He's going to flip him like he's a baseball card. The fact of the matter is, these aren't the real Superman and Batman. They're enemy agents disguised as Superman and Batman. In this particular story, and there was another one before this, because not only was Batmania going on, but we also had Bond Mania going on. So in this story, Jimmy takes on the identity of Agent 55, as he did in a previous story. We get the name 55 simply because Jimmy and Olsen both have 5 letters in the name. But once again, this is a fun story, and it's one of those stories. Yeah, so once again, that's a really great story, and it's one of those stories that makes the Silver Age of comic books so good. No, not good at all. It's what makes the Silver Age of comics great.
That was finishing off.